Thank you for watching. This is the board wrap-up show for Ponca City Public Schools. It's our monthly check-in with Superintendent Shelley Arrott. It's a recap of the Board of Education meeting for June, and let's get started with Superintendent Arrott. And there were the regular board meeting, but there was a hearing before that, a budget hearing, and tell us how that works. I mean, that hearing is first, and then it's voted on at the board meeting?
That is correct. School budgets run on the fiscal year, which is from July 1 to June 30th. So always in June at our June meeting, we prepare our projected budget for fiscal year 19, which is the case. So our Executive Director of Finance, Brenda Story, kind of laid out where we are and where we stand for fiscal year 19, presented that to the board, and it's always in an open public meeting, and then we approved that budget for fiscal year 19, or our board members do.
Very nice. Well, the June Board of Education meeting involved an Oklahoma flag project. Roosevelt, you had an art teacher from Roosevelt Elementary come in.
We had an art teacher and 3 students from Roosevelt come and talk to us about a project they're doing at Roosevelt. Actually, they've done it all year long. Roosevelt has a morning assembly every morning, and they've been learning about the state of Oklahoma, things that are produced in the state, some specific history about the state. And our art teacher, Mary Morse, had done a project, and her kids actually designed an Oklahoma flag out of colored bottle caps. So they collected like 22,000 bottle caps. In the background, obviously, different sizes, different shapes of blue bottle caps, and then green and yellow and orange, which makes the symbol in the middle of the Oklahoma flag. And they spelled out the word Oklahoma. It's just like the flag, a replica of the flag. And then they used an acrylic to fill in between, and it is just a gorgeous flag. It's huge. I don't even know the dimensions, but it's got to be probably about 5 feet by 8 feet. And they are actually going to hang that in the foyer at Roosevelt, but they brought it to the board and explained to the board how they made that and the process and showed it to them, and it was lovely. They're also going to do an American flag this next year, so they'll be collecting red, white, and blue bottle caps.
Very nice. Well, just because school is out for the summer, it certainly doesn't stop Ponca City Public Schools from operating. In fact, it's a very busy time of year during the summer for a lot of the staff and support staff of Ponca City Public Schools. One of the things that was important was the superintendent's report for this Board of Education meeting. What does that include?
Well, it basically just included an update of the state of education for fiscal year 18, and then some concerns for years going forward. We talked a lot about the House Bill 1010XX, the revenue raising measure, which would fund the teacher pay raise and what that means for schools and specifically our district. And then we talked about the potential veto referendum and the challenges in regard to that. So I'll just recap just some high points of that. As far as the state of our state in regard to education, and this is no secret to anyone, since 2009 schools have faced funding shortfalls for the last 10 years without a shadow of a doubt. And we've had mid-year budget cuts for the last 3 years due to revenue failures. So that means we have to realign and refocus on our budget that we prepare in June for fiscal year 19. But those cuts, when we're already down to the bare minimum and we get a mid-year cut, that really does pose a problem for us because we've got our employees lined out and our programs lined out. This is interesting news. Out of all the school districts in Oklahoma, over 90 districts have gone to a 4-day week. For various reasons, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. This, to me, is the most critical issue that we're facing in Oklahoma. In addition to the budget cuts, is our teacher pay. In the state of Oklahoma, there were 1,943 emergency certificates approved, teaching certificates approved, which, to give you just a little background, this was in fiscal year 2018. In fiscal year 2011, in the entire state of Oklahoma, there were 32 emergency teaching certificates.
Wow.
So in 7 years, it's increased more than 500%. And we're feeling those effects here in Ponca City. This last year, we had 19 teachers on an emergency certificate. Unfortunately, we've been in a good position. A lot of our support personnel had a degree, and how you can get an emergency certificate is you have to have at least a bachelor's degree, and then we can get an emergency certificate, and there's some training and some required hours, and the proficiency testing has to occur within 2 years, and then it transfers to a standard teaching certificate. But with that said, the crisis is real. We are facing it. I think OU had 25 education graduates this year. Alva, which is a big feeder for us, had 13 education graduates. There have been a lot of charter schools and virtual charter schools developed, which pull from the state funding formula. Our health insurance premiums continue to increase every January, and we pick up that increase. The state does give us flexible benefit allowance to help pay for that insurance, but the increases really hurt. And our teacher pay. The teacher walkout was the big news in early March, and what our public really hasn't been seeing is our teachers have been walking out for the last 10 years. They've been walking to Texas, to Kansas, to Arkansas, to New Mexico. With the impending revenue raising bills that will go toward a teacher pay raise, if that all goes through, that should bring us to about 28th in the nation rather than 48th in the nation. And it should also increase our per pupil spending in our region. We're dead last in our region. It could bring us to number 2. But there's a lot of caveats to that, which I'll talk a little bit about. And I mentioned some of the effects to the state of education, but the teacher shortage crisis is real. And we continue to have school and move on. And unless you're part of the school business, you really don't realize what a crisis this is. So far this year, we have had about 55 resignations, and that's changing as we speak. We still have about 8 or 9 positions to fill. It's really hard to come by a special education teacher, a math teacher, a science teacher, and it's even getting to the point that it's hard to fill our elementary and early childhood positions. So a lot of our people coming in haven't been education trained, so it's more on us to train them, and we do. We provide a lot of training to our teachers, but we're moving from an orientation phase to an induction phase where we work with our newer teachers for up to 3 years. Our teachers have until June 19th to submit their resignation, or they're deemed under contract with the district. And what we can do is we can hold their certificate. We try not to if we can find a replacement. But the fact of the matter is, if they go to Kansas or Texas, they don't need that Oklahoma certificate. So they actually could resign after the 19th, or if they leave the profession, and more teachers are leaving the profession. And I mentioned to you that over 90 school districts have moved to a 4-day week. That's not about saving money, because they may go additional hours. The only thing that they may save would be their utilities for that day, but it's a recruiting tool. There have been a lot of districts that have gone to a 4-day week just to recruit. So if a teacher makes the same pay working 4 days a week, it is a good recruiting tool. If anybody's wondering if Ponca City will go that direction, we certainly do not want to, because it's a hardship on our parents, and that might be years down the road, and I'm hopeful that education will turn around. I also talked a little bit about legislation in whole. There were 360 education bills this section, and there were 300 carryover, and most of those bills focused on revenue, pay raises, that kind of thing. But there were a few bills out there, such as the In God We Trust posters that can now be hung and sunscreen applications. So they were all over the charts, but most of it was revenue increases. I also talked about the recap of the funding bills, the revenue bill, House Bill 1010XX, and after that was all said and done, that was an increase in GPT from 2 to 5%, a $1 a pack cigarette tax, and a 3-cent gasoline and a 6-cent diesel fuel tax. And as you know, that bill is being challenged by a group, Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite, and they are filing a veto referendum, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that. As far as the general appropriations, the GA bill, there was $2.9 billion appropriated to education this year, which was a 19% increase. And that includes the funding for the support raises and the teacher pay raises. And let me talk to you a little bit about that, how that will affect Ponca City. The revenue will run through the state aid formula. And the formula is based on your weighted ADM, your weighted average daily membership based on your enrollment, and then students have different weights depending on what grade they're in or if they have a special needs or something like that. But since it runs through the formula, it's going to affect schools differently. And I may have mentioned this on this show before, and I've talked to our teachers about it in public forums about it. Our fiscal year 19 budget is going to be based on our weighted ADM from fiscal year 17, and from fiscal year 16 to fiscal year 17, we lost 220 students. So with that money going through the formula, we're not going to have enough to pay the raise. We are going to be about $1 million short as far as state aid funding. Now, we are going to have enough to pay the raise because we could see this coming. We knew in 2017 that we needed to start preparing for 2019 because our enrollment dropped. So our carryover, good news is our carryover is extremely high. It's about 18%. A district our size, we can carry over about 14% of our budget and not get a penalty. So here's the good news. You have 2 years to take care of your excess before you get the penalty. Not going to be a problem for us because if these raises are imposed, that will be $1 million that we'll have to use out of our carryover to complete the raises. And then because of the drop in enrollment, we're going to have about $750,000 less. So we're talking 1.8 million less. We'll be fine this year, and we'll likely be fine next year, but if these revenue raising measures are challenged, schools will not be able to make it if legislature doesn't do something differently. I do want to just talk a little bit about the veto referendum. Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite group have filed the veto referendum, and this is allowed by Oklahoma Constitution. And if they get 5% of the number of signatures who voted in the last gubernatorial election, then that question will go on the ballot. Now, that question has been challenged by some groups. They feel that it might be unconstitutional or some deficiencies at best, and I won't go into the details on that. The Supreme Court did hear oral arguments on that on Monday, just this past Monday, so we should get a ruling on that. Some of the questions were House Bill 1010XX, as filed with the Secretary of State in Oklahoma, included 2 taxes that were repealed, which was the little cigar tax and the hotel motel tax. So some of the people are questioning if you are have a state question, a veto referendum for House Bill 1010XX. It's filed with those additional 2 taxes. So are we repealing the original? They only included the taxes that were not appealed. So that's the question, that's the challenge, and we'll see what happens. If it's deemed unconstitutional, one group challenged it as unconstitutional. If the Supreme Court deems it as unconstitutional, then it's over. It goes no further. If they deem that the state question 799 had deficiencies as written, then the group has time to correct those deficiencies, but they have to get the signatures by July 18th. So, which is next month. So that's the bills being challenged. Big question for schools will be the Attorney General's opinion or the Supreme Court's opinion on, was this bill truly enacted as written? It wasn't enacted as written, but it did pass. So the question is, will schools still be responsible for paying the raises whether we have the revenue or not? Which is a huge problem.
Yeah.
No schools can make
Right.
it if the revenue's not there, and it'll be up to Congress, our lawmakers, to figure out how we're going to be able to pay that. So, long story short, we are just on hold right now. We should hear something from the Supreme Court. They say within a week or 10 days of the June 11 oral arguments, and then the Attorney General's opinion is that. This is not an opinion, this is a brief. Let me make that clear. He has not given a formal opinion, but he said that he felt like that the raises were in place for next year, but it's a complicated issue because the revenue has been challenged, so he would want to leave that to the Supreme Court. So we are basically just on hold. Now, with that being said, the raise for our support staff is not tied to anything, so it will go into place effective July 1. So our support personnel will feel the effects of the raise on their July payroll, the end of July payroll.
Oh, good. Very good. Well, that's a lot of information.
It was a lot of information.
And it's certainly a lot of information, and certainly a lot of challenges. One of the challenges for the June Ponca City Public Schools Board of Education meeting was approving the 2018-19 budget.
Yes, and Brenda did present that. Again, it's based on what we know. So
How difficult is that? I mean, as superintendent, when the things are on hold and you're not sure where the money's going to come from, how can you approve that budget? Is it just knowing what you have to carry over to supplement?
We know what we have to carry over. We know what our personnel costs are. We know what the costs will be if we have to go ahead and enact the raises for both our certified and our support. And the law is written so that administrators get that raise, everyone in the district with the exception of the superintendent. Right. So we have calculated all that. We have it at worst case scenario, and then we'll adjust from there if we have to.
Contract approvals, and this is a kind of a routine thing that's done. And of course, certainly the typical, but the budget is considered in these contract approvals, I'm sure. But you didn't have any problem getting those approved.
No. And one thing that I want to mention is, the week prior to a board meeting, we have a finance committee meeting, a property committee meeting, and a curriculum committee meeting. And since we have 5 board members, we can have 2 members at each committee meeting. They're assigned to these committee meetings, and we haven't violated the Open Meetings Act because we don't have a quorum of our board members. It would take 3. So we go through those contracts with a fine-tooth comb. If we didn't do that, our board meetings, we would probably still be having our Monday night board meeting.
Right.
So they know about all these contracts in advance, and they have big discussions, and we always talk about our costs from the previous year versus this year, if it's gone up, or if we've eliminated a contract, or if we're adding a contract, and we validate that to the board in our minutes, our open records. So anyone can see those.
All right.
So yeah, we did a lot of contract approval.
There was a cooperative agreement with the Lutheran school. Tell us about this, please.
Okay, we have done this since 1989, and it's an OSSAA regulation. You can co-op with one school that doesn't offer the services that we offer, and we co-op with Lutheran just in the junior high for every athletic event that we have or athletic sport that we have that they don't have. Now they have basketball at Lutheran Junior High basketball, so we don't co-op on our basketball teams. But Lutheran kids can come in and play golf and softball and tennis with the sports that they don't have, but we do. Here's the bottom line: the Lutheran kids are going to be our students when they come to high school anyway.
Sure.
So that contract was approved again.
All right, very good. There will be a special Board of Education meeting coming up on the 20th. Tell us why the 20th.
Well, on the 19th, we are accepting bids to resurface the parking lot at Roosevelt, the new parking lot. We tore down the house we owned the property, and there was a home on that was older, and we tore that down. We bought the property, and now it's just a dirt parking lot. So we're going to take bids to resurface that on the 19th, and we need to get that approved ASAP because we've got to start working on that or we're not going to be ready for school starts. And one of the critical reasons we need to do that is we are moving Wildcat Academy from 111 West Grand to one of the outer buildings at Roosevelt.
I see.
And we're going to need some additional parking. So we need to get that approved or considered for approval and start that project.
Very nice. Project update.
Okay, well, probably people have seen around town all of our projects that are going on. Our concert hall, which looks amazing, is a little bit behind schedule. Should be done about the 1st of September, and of course we'll do an open house, and it's going to be wonderful. We are actually putting in some LVT, luxury vinyl tile, in the hallways at East. We were in huge need of flooring at East. We're doing a remodel at West, and it's in full force right now. And both of those two projects will be done before school starts. They have to be, so we can get students in there. Our weight training facility is completed. We had an open house the night of our spring football game, and it's fabulous, and if anybody would like to see, we'd be glad to take them in there. We are building a new football dressing room, and it's on the east end of the end zone, just beyond the east end zone. And then we're doing some remodeling to our old dressing room, and people probably have seen some construction. We're actually that little ticket booth that's on the west side is going to be now in the corner of that locker room.
Oh, fantastic.
And that'll be our visitors dressing room. So some great projects coming up. Great things for our kids.
Well, a very busy June Board of Education meeting with Ponca City Public Schools and Superintendent Shelley Arrott. Thank you so much for all of the information.
Okay, you bet.
All right. That's going to do it for this edition of the Board Wrap-Up Show, and we'll be with you again very soon for another edition right here. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.